This week we're going to talk about work items, which you can consider as part of the analysis. Now, we are going to reorganize the requirements as we learned it in the previous steps in terms of epics, features, user stories, and task or subtask. These are hierarchies, okay? So the lowest level in the hierarchy is the task or the subtask. So that is close to the implementation details. Okay, most likely technical. It's like one task is in the individually manageable pieces of work. Okay, so this is close to the technical implementation. Okay, so at this moment we are still in the requirement engineering stage. We're not gonna reach this level. So this is outside of the scope of this course. So in the 3352, we're not going to talk about tasks. That's what you're going to determine in the winter course 3350 when we start the scrum, when we start the sprints. You're going to need to decide what are the specific tasks related to the implementation that you're going to include. But at this moment, for the sake of this course, for the sake of this stage, we're gonna end at the user story. So user story is the lowest level that we're gonna reach. So a user story is a feature or a requirement from the user's perspective. Okay, so now we are organizing what we learned about the requirements, particularly from the end user point of view in terms of a set of stories. Okay, and there's a template. We'll see what does the user story look like in a bit. Okay, but this is the lowest level that we're gonna reach. Okay, the most granular level that we're gonna reach here in this course, the user story itself, which represents one feature or one requirement from the user point of view. Now, both these levels, the epics and the features, are just a groupings or a level of organization for the user stories. Most of the time, you will see people organizing their work in terms of epics and stories directly. Okay, so an epic is just a large body of work that can be broken down into a number of smaller stories. Okay, so you can think of it as a logical grouping of related stories, or you can think of it as a big user story that we don't know how to break down yet. So eventually we have an epic, so we have a user story. We know it needs to be broken down, but we can put it as an epic to begin with, and then start breaking it down. Okay, so we can start with the user stories and then group them into epics, or you can start with the epic and then break it down into user stories. Okay, well, generally speaking, is there's a large body of it's a group of user stories or a big user story that is broken down into more specific user stories. Okay, now the intermediate level here, the feature, is something in between. Like it's just a group, like organizational level. It's just something in between the epic and the user story. Okay, so sometimes people use it, other times they don't. Most of the time, you see people organizing the work in terms of epics and user stories. Now, a feature is an actionable aspect of an epic that can include multiple user stories. So again, it's multiple user stories, but it is smaller than the epic. Okay, now let's have an example. So let's say we are working on a project. One of the features or one of the aspects of that project include online store. Okay, so you're creating a web application to manage a store, including an online version. Okay, so the project is you are creating a web application to manage a retail store. So that retail store can have things in person, okay, and it can have a online store, okay. So the online store is one of the epics there. Okay, obviously this is but like a very big epic, okay, a very big chunk of work. All right, now a feature would be one of the actionable items under this epic, so the shopping cart. Okay, the shopping cart is one of the features or actionable aspects of the online store. Now, a particular user story under this would be as a shopper. No, there is a format for the user story. I will talk about it in a bit, but this is how it would look like. As a shopper, I would like to be able to delete an item from my shopping cart. So one atomic feature or one atomic requirement from one particular user type point of view. Okay. Now, a user story, it can be seen as like multiple. You can look at it from the different perspectives. So you can see it as a requirement elicitation tool, or you can see it as a requirement analysis tool. Now, if you look at the agile extension of the BA guide, you will see it listed as one of the requirement analysis models. Okay, so after the elicitation, you organize the work or reformat the work in terms of user stories. So you can, in that aspect, it can be considered a requirement analysis. But you can also use it for the requirement elicitation. So when you are interviewing an end user, you can ask them to, like, you can let them know what the format of the user story is and try to get them to give you the user stories directly. So that it can be a tool to help in the requirement elicitation as well. Now it can be seen as a project management tool. So that's how you represent the aspects of your project or the tasks. I don't want to use the word task because, like as we mentioned, it has a particular meaning. So let's use the work item. So when we have the user stories as work items, we can organize them. We put deadlines or like distribute them over the time span of the project. Okay, so it can be used as a project management tool. Now it can also seen as an intermediate step between formal requirement engineering and the initiation of the agile process. Now, before the agile process starts become popular, I mean, we still have the formal requirement models, something like the user case that you have learned about in a previous course, I think in 2203. So there's a use case, and then you can model all the use cases into use case diagram. So this is the UML. These are the the analysis models that we have formally in requirement engineering. But in an agile project, it might be too soon early on in the project to know that level of details. So you start with something simpler and more generic, which is the user with the user story, and then later on when you get to the elaboration stage, when you start your sprint and you get into the details so that you start developing, then you can have enough information to fill in the details. Okay, so the user story was introduced in the industry, actually was like the concept itself came up from the industry in order to solve this problem. So we can't really create that detailed use case model because we don't have enough information yet. Okay, so what do we do? So we can use the user story as an intermediate step between that detail model and the initial stages of the work of the project. Okay.